Welcome to Venus Codes, which is normally a German-speaking podcast. I think it's the same introduction I made last time, Emily, but from time to time I do have English-speaking guests, and today I have again my astrologer Emily Trinkaus. Welcome back to the Venus Codes.
Thank you. I'm honored to be your English-speaking guest. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And today we're speaking again about Depeche Mode. So we did an episode on Dave Gahan, and I'm gonna link it everywhere, above, below, everywhere, because we found out we have this common topic of Depeche Mode in very different times of our lives, because you were a great fan in your high school time, right?
Back in the 80s.
And for me, it started in the 2000s and goes on until today. But if anyone wants to hear more about that, you can go back to that old episode and hear about Dave Gahan's chart and transits when he had his overdose in the 90s. But today, we want to talk about the synastry of that means relationship astrology, of the two remaining members of the band, which are Martin Gore and Dave Gahan. And then we're gonna, mainly you, Emily, we're gonna look at some specific events that I choose or proposed of the band's history and the transits. That's right.
That's right.
And yeah, we wanted to do this Synastry podcast episode about Depeche Mode, and then we found out we have a problem. We don't have a birth time for Martin Gore. So why is that a problem, Emily? Can you explain?
Yeah, so without a birth time, we still can see a lot. We can see where the planets were when he was born, but we don't know the rising sign and we
Mm-hmm.
don't know the houses, right? The houses are determined by the birth time, and so is the rising sign. So we don't know all of that. And then also, the moon moves quite quickly in astrology. And the day that he was born, the moon could have been in one of two signs. So we also don't quite know his moon sign. So that does present, well, it just limits how much we can see in their
Mm-hmm.
synastry.
Mm-hmm.
But we can still certainly see certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, what we're going to look at is Martin's influence on Dave, because we can see where Martin's planets land in Dave's chart. And
Mm-hmm.
we cannot do the opposite because we don't know where
Which is
Martin's houses
such
are.
a pity. So if anyone knows Martin's birth time, or Martin, if you watch this, please send it in. Because
That's
I
right.
really, as I told you in my email yesterday, I admire him so much from an artistic level. He's such a great artist, and I would have loved to see it in both directions. But yeah, we can only do work with what we have, and that is without a birth time.
Right. And the other thing that would be cool with a birth time is to be able to create the composite chart, which is a chart of the relationship itself, which can be pretty fascinating, especially in a long time collaboration. So that's the other thing that we cannot see, but we'll look at what we can look at.
Yes. So how shall we go from here? Do you want to speak from the charts first, or shall I talk about what I have found out about their relationship?
Um, hmm. How about I could start with a chart and start saying a few things, and then you can chime in with
Hmm.
because I really don't know anything about their story.
No. Oh, I love that. Then you go
Right.
first.
I'm going blind here. I'm just gonna
Yeah, really
okay.
nothing.
Really nothing. Really nothing.
I mean, it's not that I know too many details, but yeah.
Okay. So what we're gonna start with is putting Dave's chart on the inside and Martin's chart on the outside. This is called a biwheel. And this
Mm-hmm.
is a go-to technique for synastry, which is comparing two charts or how do two charts relate to each other. So this is Dave's chart on the inside. And since we do know his birth time and we have his rising sign, Taurus,
Mhm.
and his houses, right? And then we're seeing, okay, we're transposing Martin's birth chart onto Dave's to see where his stuff lands in Dave's chart. Um, and what I want to start with, something that just seemed very poetic that jumped out at me, the seventh house, which is the house of partnerships of all kinds, and certainly their creative collaboration would fit into the seventh house. And within the seventh house, the strongest point is the DS, the descendant, the point opposite the ascendant or rising sign. So
Mm.
the descendant having so much to do with relationship and the people we attract into our lives. And Martin's Neptune is almost in a precise conjunction with the descendant. His Neptune is at 8 degrees. Dave's descendant is at 7 degrees. And yes, Dave, they were only born a year apart, or a
Mm.
little over a year apart.
Mm.
So the outer planets, the slower moving planets, are pretty much in the same place. Neptune hasn't gone. Dave was born with Neptune at 11 degrees, Martin with Neptune at 8 degrees. But I just thought it was poetic since Neptune is the planet of music and imagination and is a very creative energy. And
Mhm.
so, Dave calling in a musical collaborator, and what can be challenging with Neptune on the descendant, and that means it's opposite his ascendant, his rising sign, is that sometimes a Neptunian influence can feel confusing, or initially there can be oh my God, you're my dream, ideal person. This is going to be perfect. This is where a lot of projections of the dream, the ideal, put you up on a pedestal, and then inevitably the disillusionment, the disappointment. Oh, I thought you were this, and it turns out you're not that at all. There could be a lot of fantasy involved
Mhm.
there. So I don't know if there was that kind of initial connection of like, oh, and then, oh, you're not who I thought you were, or something, some kind of disillusionment.
So, shall I shall I
Sure.
take? So, I mean, I don't have I didn't find I think I would have had to read books to find like more details about the early stages. But a theme that I found about their relationship, so it seems like it went kind of well when they started, kind of, I mean, they had quite quick, big success. I mean, it was growing and growing, but you knew them in the 80s and they started in 80 or 81, so they didn't take decades to success. That's what I mean. So, and I don't know how they got along, but in those early stages, but it's very they are very well known for a rivalry, for being in yeah, not really, yeah, in competition, for being in competition, because you wanna say something?
I really do, because something else that really stood out to me was their two Marses. So Dave's Mars at 14 degrees of Aries. And
Hmm.
Mars has a lot to do. I mean, Mars is the planet of competition. And Mars has a lot to do with how do you do what you do? How do you assert yourself? How do you go after what you want? It's the masculine principle. And
Hmm.
Martin's Mars is at 14 degrees of Virgo. So now Mars and Aries, this is a very strong Mars because this is Mars in its home sign. And this could be a potentially for Dave, a pushy, assertive, I want what I want, this is how it's going to be. And also more impulsive, this is very fiery. I feel like this, split second decisions. Whereas Mars and Virgo, and so basically their two Marses are precisely in a quincunx or in
Hmm.
conjunct, which
Hmm.
is like this energy of we're so different, we don't even know like the quincunx is one sign off of an opposition.
Hmm.
Opposites have a lot in common, But
Mm-hmm.
the quincunx, when the signs that are quincunx have nothing in common, they operate so differently. So Mars in Virgo wants to do it, get it perfectly, do it right, take a precise small action at the perfect time that's going to make all the difference. There's nothing spontaneous or uh, pushy or right. It's very precise and well thought out, and we're going to take our time to do it right. Very different from the just do it, let's go, impatient, I got to make this happen now, Mars and Aries. So I could imagine in a working together relationship, their approaches would be very different in terms of getting something done. And this could also, when two people's Mars are in a hard angle, that can also be the competition, that they're
Mm-hmm.
triggering some like that Martian thing in each other, triggering that competitive.
Interesting. Interesting. So you jump in whenever you feel like it, right? Because Dave described Martin, which this sounds a bit different, but Dave described Martin as a dictator. Because Martin was writing the songs, all the music, or the songs, the lyrics for more than 20 years, and Dave was just singing them and was not allowed or whatever, not feeling confident enough. I don't know why, but in the detail, he did not write songs. He just sang Martin's words and Martin's feelings. And only until like it was only in the 2000s when Dave also started contributing songs to Depeche Mode.
No,
So,
so what's so interesting here is, like I said, this is a very strong Mars, right? Mars
mm-hmm,
in Aries, but it's
mm-hmm,
also in the 12th house, which is
mm-hmm.
a hidden house and the house of the unconscious. So it also makes me wonder, someone born with Mars in the 12th house, about suppressed desire.
Yeah.
And I want something, but I'm not going to go after it. And yeah, maybe because of a lack of confidence or insecurity or something, but like a sense of like he's got this fire, he's got this assertion, and he's keeping it under wraps, and therefore, this other Mars kind of taking over, dominating. So this can be where someone, instead of feeling like I have power, I have the power to assert my will, instead they feel victimized and then build up quite a bit of resentment,
Mm-hmm,
right? It's like the seething anger behind the scenes. And yet it's, and projecting that power onto somebody else because
mm-hmm,
he's not owning it himself, right? So it's interesting, that he went through this evolution of owning his power and stepping more into it. And this is also, and I know we talked about his addiction last time, and that's the 12th house, also the 12th house of escapism, addiction. Oh, I don't feel powerful, so I'm going to destroy
mm-hmm,
myself instead
mm-hmm.
of asserting that power outward.
Yes, because you also talked about the DS Neptune thing. You said projection, and I thought he
Yes,
was like kind of seems like he might have projected his part of his gift onto Martin.
right, absolutely.
And actually, I find it interesting. It somehow for me relates with Mars that Dave then went on to do a solo album first. And after that, started contributing songs to Depeche Mode. Isn't that's a Marcy thing, isn't it?
Very, yeah, very Mars and Aries, but yeah, interesting that it's almost like he had to prove himself to himself before he felt confident enough to bring himself more into the band. Something else that stands out to me here on the whole maybe insecurity theme is
Mm-hmm.
that Dave was born with a Cancer moon, and Cancer is a sign that can feel quite insecure.
Mm.
And Martin's Saturn is in a pretty close opposition to his moon. And Saturn is the planet of authority. And Saturn in Capricorn, this is Saturn in its home sign. This is a very strong Saturn that Martin has. This is a very strong moon. This is the moon in its home sign. But the moon in Cancer, where, like, oh, I feel insecure and I don't know if it's okay to be seen, and maybe I just need to hide in my crab shell. And here's Martin's very powerful Saturn opposite that moon. And Saturn in Capricorn is about taking charge and being the adult and being in his authority. But when someone's Saturn is opposite your moon, that can feel restrictive or limiting, or like it. And the oppositions, this is oppositions are, it's like someone playing, taking on this Capricorn role of the authority, this Saturn in Capricorn, the authority, where I'm the little kid, or I'm helpless, or I'm at the mercy of this, I guess, author, someone who seems like the authority
Mm.
figure, right? So I could also see it could be easy for him to give away his power or again, projection. Oppositions are connected with projection, like the seventh house. I can see where, if he was feeling insecure, it'd be very easy to project his power onto Martin.
Hmm. Yeah. This whole insecurity piece, I've got it from our last conversation and also from, so I don't want to like talk about him. He's been so insecure, but I think he really talked about it, and we talked about it in the first Depeche Mode episode that he felt like an imposter. He named that. So it's not something we are projecting on today, but he really named that. That's just something I wanted to add.
Yeah,
Um,
and we probably talked about this in the first one too, but where Martin's Saturn is maybe, yeah, just in a really powerful position here. Dave was born with Saturn on his south node, karmic past. And so that can be like a lot of issues around how to take authority or how to take power.
mhm,
What I think is cool here with their nodes, and the nodes are something I pay a lot of attention to in synastry, because they really point to, why is this person in this other person's life? What's the evolutionary intent of the relationship? So first, to point out that since they again, we're only born about a year apart, they both have the North Node in Leo, and Leo is the rock star. Leo is here to be in the spotlight. So they're both on this trajectory of, lifetimes of more blending in and being the support person in the background, to being the star, being center stage. And Martin's North Node at 27 degrees of Leo ends up very close to Dave's Uranus at 26 degrees of Leo. And so this
mhm,
is like part of Martin's role in Dave's life is to help bring out more of Dave's originality, innovation, and this, that connection to me really speaks to a very creative and exciting and outside the box kind of creative collaboration.
mhm.
Um, and I think there's also something to, but it's interesting to me too, because yes, it's the North Node in Leo and all this Leo energy, but this Leo energy is in Dave's fourth house, which is the deep self. So it's kind of like really, Dave's on this path, and again, we don't know which house Martin's North Node is in his own chart,
Yeah.
but Dave's on a path to like know himself as the rock star from within, and to make it more about, this is who I am from the heart, versus I need to look a certain way for other people to respect me or validate me. So this is like really that that creative expression from a really deep place within himself, and a deep emotional place. And like you said, it took some time for him to get to the point where he was expressing his own emotional truth. But there's
Mm,
something, Martin's role in his life is to help bring that out of him, and to bring out the deep, maybe more, hidden feelings and creativity and wildness and innovator self that maybe he didn't feel so comfortable about being seen as it, or having those parts of himself be seen. But
Mm.
Martin is here to help him do that with his North Node right there.
That's so poetic how those people who are sometimes difficult for us or like trigger something in us, how they are actually from a soul perspective here to help us become who we are meant to be. I
Exactly.
love this.
Exactly. Yeah, and maybe and with Uranus it can be like helping us in very unexpected, weird, maybe um uh, what's the word? Like Uranian energy can feel shattering or extreme, or like a shakeup, so kind of shaking up his inner world in a way that probably felt or feels very uncomfortable, but in
Hmm.
order to take him to a higher expression and higher, to evolve his creative expression.
Hmm.
And one other thing I'll mention is that their Venuses are quite close to each other.
Oh,
They both have
interesting.
Venus and Gemini, and within 4 degrees of each other, so quite close together. And Venus is a fast-moving planet, so we see that, yeah, Uranus is close, Pluto's very close, Neptune's very close, right? Because within a year those planets don't move much, but Venus would have gone all the way around and back again. And so it is quite significant. And Venus is a planet, among other things, of creativity, creative gifts. And this is, it's kind of cool thinking about Dave's initial reluctance to write his own music, etc. Because it seems like Martin is really holding up a mirror for Dave's gifts, because Dave has Venus and Mercury in Gemini. Of course, he has talent for writing and creating his own, from his own words, right? But it seemed like maybe he needed that mirror of Martin, like, oh, actually, you're reflecting something for me about my own creative gifts with language and
Hmm.
self-expression.
Hmm. Interesting. Something I found about them was that I wonder if you find something about this in the charts, that they, even today, and we're gonna get their relationship evolved, seems to have evolved quite a bit. But even today, they don't seem to communicate much, despite via the music. Like they are not friends. They are what they described. So again, I read and listened to interviews as a preparation for this episode or for this recording, and they don't seem to communicate much, despite through the music and through working on music and also on stage. They said, or I think it was Dave who said, they don't really communicate much on stage. They communicate through the music. That's what he said. Do you find
Interesting.
do you find
Well,
that in the charts?
what's interesting here, and I know again we talked about Dave's own maybe communication challenges with his Mercury in that square to Jupiter and Chiron in Pisces, and again here's where the insecurity can come in. On the one hand, Dave's able to tune in very intuitively and pick up on a lot and be a channel for bigger energies coming through, healing energies coming through, but also there can be that, do I really know what I'm talking about? Am I full of shit? Am I crazy? So Dave himself has kind of a challenged Mercury, but then it's interesting because they have such different Mercuries, right? Dave with his Mercury in Gemini and Martin with his Mercury in Cancer. And Mercury in Cancer is much more of a feeling, like communicating in a more sensitive feeling way, and not so mental, not so heady like the Mercury in Gemini, but also that Martin's Mercury in Cancer is in a hard angle, in a square with Dave's Mars. So I feel like maybe there's something where Martin, who is a sensitive communicator or maybe sensitive about his communication, maybe where he felt um, like a kind of, I don't know, insensitivity or anger, or was felt unable to express, speak from the heart because of this conflict with Mars and Dave's chart, where then he feels like, oh, he's going to shut me down or be harsh or be impatient when I'm trying to take my time to say what I need to say in a sensitive feeling way. um, so yeah, I could see some challenges on the communication front for sure.
I would love I would love to know from them now how they experienced like in detail. I read about them that they took in the 90s or 2000s, they took like psychotherapists with them on tour and but also dealers. I don't know. But I would really love to know from their perspective. So, and I think both of them I don't feel comfortable like analyzing other people's psyches, but yeah, now we're doing it. I feel both of them are very highly sensitive people and artists, but
Yeah.
they present very differently. So, and we talked about Dave, and he's really he looks extroverted. He's not extrovert, no, but he's really like the stage animal, or how do you say that? Like this pe person taking center stage, and he's making the big show in the concerts. And Martin is. He brings such a different energy to the stage. He's much more in the background, but even when he sings song and he's in the center of attention, it's usually like when he's singing the lead voice, it's usually quieter and everything is softer, and those are the most of the calmer, silent moments in the Depeche Mode concerts
Mm.
when Martin takes center stage. Do you see that? Would you say that's the Venus that, no, the Mercury that you just described also?
It could be. And again, it's hard without knowing his rising sign. And also, I just cast the chart for noon, which is what I typically do when I don't have a birth time.
Yeah.
And at noon, the moon has just gone into Sagittarius. But what you're saying makes me think it it might be more likely that he was born in the morning with a Scorpio moon, since that Scorpio energy is more behind the scenes. Of course, Martin also has a sun in Leo, which we would think of as right out there center stage, but we don't know where that Leo sun lands in his chart. And that might also be, if let's say he does have a Scorpio moon that's maybe more prominent than his Leo sun, maybe like, yeah, he's here to shine and be in the spotlight, but feels more like there's a natural tension between Scorpio and Leo, right? Leo's like, look at
Yeah.
me, here I am. And Scorpio's like, don't look at me. I'm just working my magic from, underground or behind the curtain,
Mm.
not being seen. So maybe there's something about Martin's own inner tension around being seen and not seen. I want to be seen. I don't want to be seen. That got triggered by Dave. But again, since we don't know, yeah, since we don't have a birth
Yeah.
time, we can't see.
But yeah, now that you say that, I bet he's a Scorpio moon. But because also I read something, and I mean I listened to the music, I know it, like about the dark and deep feelings of
Yeah.
Martin in the Depeche Mode songs that
Yes.
sounds so much like a Scorpio moon.
That makes sense.
I'm
That
quite
makes sense.
sure.
Yeah, and then also that would make sense too in terms of their collaboration, because that would put Martin's moon in Dave's seventh house of collaboration. And kind of interesting too, thinking about Dave's sun in Taurus in his first house, and the first house is what we lead with, right? So the sun in the first house being a very strong solar, here I am shining my light,
Hmm.
and then Martin playing more the Scorpio role. I'm going to be in the background, maybe powering this whole creation, but less visible. And then the
Yes,
Leo sun would be like, wait a minute, I want to be seen.
I love that. Is there anything that like really speaks to you now from this chart, or shall we go to the transits?
Well, I'll just say one more thing before you go to the transits that Martin's Jupiter in Aquarius is in Dave's 10th house, and Jupiter is about bringing the gift of expansion. If one person's Jupiter lands in someone else's 10th house, well, the 10th house is the house of career,
Mm-hmm.
public success, recognition, being seen. So that's also a yeah, helpful in terms of their collaboration and Martin's influence on Dave.
Yeah, in one interview or article that I read today or yesterday, the journalist said, so it wasn't one of the band who said that, but the journalist thought that without each other, they would never have reached this success. So this, like, it speaks a bit to this great success that the Jupiter is in the 10th or activates the
Right,
10th.
right.
Yeah,
Cool.
cool.
Okay.
Let me see if I have notes, but you can, if you like, you can pull up the first transit chart. I mean, okay, I have one something that is kind of a funny quote. So Martin said, when Dave started writing songs, it was a shock to him, to Martin's senses, because he had been the sole composer for 20 years and it took him a while to get used to it. And like he described, I watched that, he described like how his system, in my words, how his system wasn't used to this other person, Dave, bringing in the songs now. I don't think we can, I don't know if we can find it in any chart, but I found this so interesting that he put this, what it was like a real shock to him when Dave started writing songs. I just
Well,
love
and
that
this is
quote.
this is a date that I don't have, but that could be an interesting transit chart to look at too.
Oh yeah, but yeah.
And then we could see what shock Martin was ready to experience according to
Yes.
what was happening transit wise.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is their first single release of their first single, and we just had February 1981, so we don't know the exact date. I just did it for February 1st. Of course, we're not looking at the time, but just to get
Yeah.
the bigger, like what were the bigger influences happening for
Yeah.
each of them. And I think what's really interesting here is that that's when Dave was around 19 years old. And age 19 is the nodal return. It's when the North Node returns to where it was when you were born. And for Dave, it was quite exact. Here's the transiting North Node at 10 degrees of Leo
Mm.
and his natal North Node at 12 degrees of Leo. So the nodal return is a period of about a year and a half altogether while the North Node is back in the same sign. But so this is and this is the nodal return again happens age 19-ish, age 38, and so on. Keep adding,
Mm.
every 19 years ish.
Yeah.
So this is really a kind of resetting and amplification and activation of life purpose and soul's intention. And for the North Node and Leo people, that is about being seen and being a star and being in the spotlight. So he was actually, Martin was also in his nodal return. It wasn't quite as exact as Dave's in February of 1981, but they were both in that influence. And another very big thing that was happening for Dave is that Pluto at 24 degrees of Libra and going retrograde, coming back, Pluto was squaring Dave's moon. And so we already talked about that potential insecurity of the Cancer moon and also sensitivity, deep feelings. Pluto, this is a once in a lifetime transit, once in a lifetime influence,
Mm.
Pluto to the moon, which is, so this makes me wonder about um, just the impact on his inner world and his feeling, his emotional state, and issues around security and insecurity, how that success impacted him. Because it seems like he was going through something pretty deep and intense emotionally. And maybe that's also about, this square, especially what's called the opening square. First quarter
Mm.
square is a lot about leaving home and leaving behind the past and having to have a kind of reckoning with the past, and what do I need to let go of in order to step into this success. I don't know if you have any insights into that time
No,
frame.
unfortunately, I don't have much from this early time. Not really. No.
Okay, and just to say too, there was some nice, there's some very nice support from both Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn and Jupiter were quite close together in a conjunction in Libra in his sixth house of work, but they are in harmony, forming a sextile to his north node, and also in harmony with natal Saturn. And when Saturn in the sky is cooperating with natal Saturn, that's typically a time when career work stuff is flowing and easy and manifesting, having done hard work during the hard angle transits, and now there's kind of a payoff happening. So, it seems like, yeah, a lot of, flow, excitement, being on purpose, living my path, living my
Mm.
creative path, and coming with, what, how does that impact me at a deep level? And I don't, I can't remember now. I know we looked at this last time, but when was his
His over
crisis? And yeah, he
mid
was
90s.
90s. Okay.
Mid 90s,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I imagine at this time it was, yeah, very, yeah, hard on him at some level, at a deep level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
And he was, I mean, they were so young.
they were so young, 19,
I mean,
19.
I can't even imagine how it would be to be like 19 and become successful like that. That's
No,
a lot for your psyche, isn't it?
that is a lot. That is a lot. And it's interesting because looking at Martin's influences at that time. Now, again, we don't know exactly where his moon was, but now we're speculating probably in Scorpio, and it would
Mm.
be the later degrees of Scorpio. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where Uranus was at that time. So
Mm-hmm.
interesting to think of both of them having these major transits to their moons, right?
Yeah.
They're sensitive, watery moons. Moon in Scorpio is also in the water element, also quite sensitive. And Uranus is like the Uranus to the moon is this radical separation from the past and liberation from the past, and also catapulting life to a whole new level. But this
Mm.
Uranus to the moon can feel, yeah, very uncomfortable. It's all about getting out of familiar territory, shaking it up, and Scorpio moons don't love change either, or this, and Uranus is all about fast change, radical change.
Yeah.
Scorpios prefer, they just need time to feel into it and to adjust to the change and sit with something for a while. But Uranian energy is like, bam, we're doing it, past is over, going into a whole new territory. And then I also think it's he was also in a big Pluto transit to his Saturn.
Mhm.
So Pluto in the sky, again at 24 degrees of Libra, and Martin's Saturn at 26 degrees of Capricorn. So Pluto square Saturn, Saturn is always a career planet, right? Pluto, total transformation, death and rebirth. So there's a dismantling of the old path and a rebirth of his career trajectory. And but this can also feel very destabilizing. Saturn is our reality structures,
Mm.
um, And this is where, the kind of the shadow expression of that Capricorn energy, and Pluto brings out the shadows. That could be even more like, oh, I'm feeling insecure. I'm in new territory. I'm letting go of the past. This feels really uncomfortable. So I'm going to default into being more controlling and authoritarian, shadow Capricorn. I don't know. That was possible. Um, so those, yeah, that's what stands out to me about
Yeah.
that time for these guys.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, from the outside, it's look, wow, they were so lucky. They were young and they were already successful. But if you see it from what the charts suggest, it's quite an intense time in their lives, no?
Yeah, and I mean that's what we would expect to see, right? Because any kind of catapulting to success or entering a whole
Mm,
new phase, that's I mean that's a massive change, right? That's a
yes.
massive life change, and so we would expect a big outer planet transits, which are, yeah, it's both the success and the excitement and entering new territory, and then brings up a lot for them to have to process to live that kind of life.
Yeah, so interesting. Shall we look to the next chart? I'm so curious for that now.
Okay, so and I did the chart for March 19th, 1990 for the release of Violator, which I guess that was their
Yes,
most successful
yes,
album.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, so here's Dave. um, yeah, there's a lot going on here. I mean, one, just to say hello to the nodes again, I think it's interesting that this was their nodal opposition,
Mm-hmm.
right? With the North Node was in Aquarius, South Node in Leo. So again, this big, and that happens in between the returns when the nodes in the sky are opposite where they were when
Mm-hmm.
you were born. So again, a
Yeah.
big activation of the nodes. And then at that time, this is wild, but the midheaven, Dave's midheaven, the MC, which is the point of public recognition, success, being seen in the world, Neptune was right on there. Midheaven 15 degrees of Capricorn, Neptune at 14 degrees of Capricorn. And at this time, Neptune was traveling quite close to Saturn and Uranus, but it's Neptune that was exactly on his, or almost precisely on his midheaven. And here there's both the like fulfilling the dream, Neptune, of
Mm.
success and being, you know, the midheaven has a lot to do with how people see you from a distance. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
if you're a rock star, everyone's seeing you, most people are seeing you from a distance. Wow. And so that was a time when Neptune was really coloring his public image. So that's when he was like, oh, the ideal, the fantasy, the dream. And a time too where we can think about his really embodying and projecting that energy of Neptune. And Neptune is associated with glamour, like in the old meaning of glamour, like casting a spell, right?
Uh-huh.
There's something very magical and
Oh yeah.
working very powerfully on the energetic level. So he
Mm-hmm.
was like
Mm-hmm.
embodying this kind of collective
Mm-hmm.
dream and casting a spell through his music, Neptune. So that was pretty wild. And as Neptune was up here on his midheaven, it was forming an exact square to his Mars. This Mars we keep coming back to, his Mars,
Mm-hmm.
right, at 14 degrees of Aries, 14 degrees Capricorn. And Neptune square Mars, and I think this is really interesting, just considering his whole journey with addiction and a part of him that's in hiding, even as a part
Yeah.
of him is in public. But Neptune to Mars, this is a big dissolution of the old way of doing Mars. And this was just before his breakdown and
Yeah, I mean, he said everything changed with that record, and an incredibly difficult time for the band started around that time. So, and he had many problems in the first half of the 90s then, like heart attack on stage and like overdose and I don't know what. So the first half of this, it seems like this moment in time started this very, very difficult time in his life.
yeah. So this is huge. Neptune squaring his Mars, and maybe the unconscious patterns, 12th house Neptune really coming to the surface even more, and that success, Neptune on the midheaven, triggering maybe more self-destructive, addictive behaviors, Mars on the 12th, and at the same time, Pluto opposite his sun. So, and this is interesting too, because it's Pluto, again, we're back in the seventh house.
Mm-hmm.
So when Pluto's in the seventh house, and especially when it's also making an opposition to your natal planet, it seems like the change and the transformation is coming from outside, coming through somebody else, somebody in his life, or maybe somebody's, maybe several people in his life playing Pluto for him, being agents of transformation, which can feel like it's coming from the outside, being forced on me. But hey,
Mm-hmm.
it's his chart. He was ready for it. So, and I think this was still going on, or this was the precursor and what was happening as he went through his breakdown and rebirth, Pluto. And this, make it or break it moment, life or death. Pluto is life or death. Are you going to be the 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 sun you came here to be? Are you going to shine your light and be, the sun is the ruler of Leo, be the rock star you came here to be, or will you destroy yourself in the process? And that's, the end. So yeah, massive turning point for sure going on here.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah.
And at the same time, and we'll look at Martin's chart too, but this was also Saturn in the sky. Martin was going through his Saturn return, and Saturn in the sky was opposite Dave's moon, which is, even more pressure to change at a deep emotional level and find his emotional authority versus feeling like the victim or, bossed around by other people, having to find within himself his own strength and authority.
Mm-hmm.
So he was going through a lot. He had a lot going on. Very epic time for him.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like. And I feel like it was like the same album that Enjoy the Silence was on. And that song, because you said something earlier with the Neptune conjunct the MC that I don't get the words. I just have the feeling that he presented something very Neptunian to the people.
Right, right. Yes.
And this, when Enjoy the Silence, I told you in the last episode, I've seen them live for 7 times, and it's always such a spiritual experience for me. And when Enjoy the Silence comes, when they play that song in the big stadiums or the big halls, I mean, this whole show is always a spiritual thing for me. But when Enjoy the Silence comes on, which is from this time, it's like everybody is freaking out, but also like freaking like connecting with themselves in such
Yeah.
like the crowd of 30, 40, 50,000 people getting in touch with themselves so deeply when this song and everybody is so euphoric, but not in an extroverted way. Do you know? Can you feel
I
what I'm
do, and
talking about?
yes, and I love it because it's so Neptune in Capricorn as well. I mean, Capricorn is, so what you're saying, yes, ecstatic, blissful, euphoric, that's all Neptune. But Capricorn's the hermit. It's more of an internal experience.
Yes.
So to think about that, collective field of euphoria that everyone is experiencing in a deep way within themselves, and then and enjoy the silence. I mean, Neptune is also, that kind of spaciousness and
Yes.
right. But then thinking also about the name of the album, Violator, that sounds so Pluto.
Yeah,
Right?
that's so
This
interesting.
powerful force that can feel like, it's coming at me, and I'm being violated. I mean, that would be, yeah, that's a very,
That's so interesting. I mean, how you can find the astrology in the names of the album and the song. I mean, again, it's so life is so poetic, isn't it?
life is so poetic, and also it can be very obvious with astrological transits when you look at public figures, and especially artists of any kind, because as we know, astrology is a language of archetypes. And so as someone, as an artist is going through a particular transit, they can express those archetypes through their work, and that can be a really helpful way to move those energies that can feel so intense. But if they have a way to energetically engage with, artistically, creatively engage with the archetypes in their work, that can be very helpful. And isn't it cool that in the midst of, I mean, that's one of the hardest transits a person can go through, Pluto to the sun. In the midst of that, he he has this amazing success and is able to touch people.
Yes.
You're saying, like, really touch people with the depth of, with the what he's going through himself. Pluto's the underworld journey, and the ability to, bring people through an experience, an emotional process through the music, a transformational process is pretty cool.
Yes. Yes, he's bringing this through his voice and his stage show. But I'm wondering what was going on. I mean, you mentioned it for Martin because he's written the song and the album actually. So what can we find there about this time?
Yeah, so I thought it was pretty interesting that for him, like I mentioned, the Saturn return, and it was pretty full on here. Saturn in the sky at 23 Capricorn, natal Saturn 26 Capricorn. So really like coming into his own as, in his work life, in his career, stepping into greater authority in his work life. But something that really stood out to me was Chiron in the sky, 10 degrees Cancer, right exactly on his Mercury at 10 degrees Cancer. So, a Chiron transit, this can both bring up a lot of wounding and past wounding, and Mercury, his voice, his language, his words, but also to be a kind of conduit for that message, Mercury, of healing. And,
Hmm.
and Chiron, often Chiron transits, and especially when they're dead on, can be associated with crisis. And so I don't know, do you know anything about what he was going on during that time, going on for
No,
Martin during that
but
time?
I know that they both like struggled with substance abuse after this.
Mm,
It
hmm.
might have been already starting in the 80s, but like the 90s are the time I think where it all found its climax, like their crisis, but I don't know what exactly was going on in his life.
Right. And again, there's probably more that was happening in terms of the houses, and it'd be fascinating to see his midheaven. We this MC is not the real MC because that depends on birth time, so we don't
Yes.
actually know where that is. But this Chiron Mercury is interesting, especially since he is the, or was the writer of the music, and I'm thinking also he was channeling that his own healing crisis through his music and his words.
Yeah. And that happened to be the most successful album of all times. I mean, it was sold more than 7 million times.
Wow.
I mean, their most successful album of all times. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, when you talked about Dave's chart and this transit, I got the word cathartic in
Mm.
like relation to what this music did and still does for the people listening to it, that it's something somehow helps us to process something and yeah, also our deeper feelings that many people might not have space or capacity for in their day to day. And then they like, yeah, for me, those the music and the concerts are like healing events. Yeah.
Yeah, and this would be a big one of the times when that was maybe most prominent or strongest.
Mm-hmm.
And also noticing that at that time, Uranus was traveling opposite Chiron, which it has done for many years, did for many years. So Uranus at 9 degrees of Capricorn was also opposite his Mercury. So that's like a liberation of his voice, a liberation of his message. And also, Uranus has an accelerating energy, a quantum leaping energy. So, this would also reflect the band's kind of, quantum leap into new territory, and the excitement of that, but also the Chiron, the potential pain or crisis around that. And again, we're back in Cancer territory where there can be the, like, oh, this feels vulnerable and I'm sensitive and what do I do with this? And
Mm-hmm.
the insecurity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as I said, it looks like it did not. It wasn't only easy, and we talked about it earlier, that this kind of success is never easy to an energetic system or a soul. Like, yeah, because it looks like they both created from whatever depth and crisis they experienced themselves and did so much for the people listening to the music. But as Dave said, it all also started an incredibly difficult time. So yeah, very I'm just somehow amazed by how close things in life are together, like this ecstatic and so touching and uplifting stuff, but where that it often comes from such difficult faces so that are and I don't want to make this idea of the how is it the starving artist or everything has to be hard to be
Right.
beautifully created. I don't think that, but often those crisis moments or this really going to our depths where there is not only beauty, there is beauty, but not only beauty, how those deep Plutonian or whatever, those deep dives bring something so beautiful to the world. I'm just somehow amazed,
Yes.
mesmerized in this moment.
Well said. And I think there's something about the resonance for the listener who feels who's feeling those energies come through the band and touching something deep that maybe we can't find language for, but it touches us because they're coming from a deep place and they're willing to
Hmm.
go there and they're expressing it, and that it is healing to have that mirrored back to us, even and maybe especially the painful parts and the suffering. I mean, that's the difference between, we can love the pop music, happy songs, everything's great, la la la, but that's not really touching our soul in the same way as people who are on that journey themselves and speaking to that, what they're going through, and even if the words themselves aren't speaking to it, but the quality of the music and
Hmm.
the energy behind it. And
Yeah.
that's, yeah, I mean, this is very, very healing with Chiron here. And this is something that I think is pretty cool in Martin's birth chart, is that he has, and actually let's just take a look at, so I can show this in his chart. Again, we don't know the houses, but we know that his Mercury in Cancer is in this trine, harmony flow with Neptune,
Hmm.
music, the imagination. which is also trining his Chiron, the healer, right, in Pisces, music. So there is this quality of, so this is a grand trine in water, considered a very powerful configuration. And in the water element, that is all about touching people at that deep emotional level
Yeah.
that's transcendent, Neptune, that takes us to that otherworldly place by
Mm,
going very deep into the personal cancer and the feelings, right? And being willing to express that brings the healing, Chiron. And so to think about when Violator was released and this Mercury was being super activated by both Chiron and Uranus in the sky, that was like setting off this grand trine. Because the thing about trines is that they can be more passive, right? Like trines are where we can take things for granted and be like, oh, that, whatever.
mm-hmm.
Can't everyone do that? No. So often it can take a big transit to activate planets in that trine to really, oh, now we're really experiencing, now it's really coming out. Now it's being Uranus, it's being liberated, even as maybe that might be bringing up a kind of crisis in his personal life. But there's this, otherworldly, very expansive, going places that he's not like consciously controlling or consciously even knowing what's going on, but being sort of carried by that bigger energy. Yeah, very, I'd say spiritual healing is the through his words, through his voice.
Yeah, that's so Martin. I feel that's so true. What you just said, and looking at this Chiron, Neptune, Mercury, that's him. So interesting. I'm fascinated again. I'm always fascinated, Emily, when we do these astrology deep dives.
I know, it's so cool. You got to get on the phone with his mom and get the birth time.
I have to, I have to manage somehow. Um, We have a third transit. So I just wanted to ask you, you told me that you checked also Andrew Fletcher's chart. Do you also want to bring that in, or
Sure. Should we look at his death in relation to the other, to David Martin first and then bring in his chart? Or
maybe, yeah, what do you feel like? Yeah, maybe.
let's stick with those guys, and then we'll bring in a third chart. But yeah, do you want to say a little bit about his death and the significance of
So,
that?
I mean, there have been other members of Depeche Mode, but it's been Dave, Martin, Andy for decades. That's how I started knowing them. I don't know when the last, sorry to everyone who's very devoted to early Depeche Mode because I don't know about the others, Alan Wilder and who has been there. But it's been those three for a very, very long time. And then 3 years ago, on May 26, 2022, Andrew Fletcher died very, very suddenly, very unexpected. He was seemed to be a healthy person. And yeah, we wanted to talk about what it did to the remaining band, right? And they said, and it's been talked about a lot, that it really, really changed, of course. They were three and now they are two. It changed the dynamic, and but especially regarding what we already talked about their competition, their rivalry. They never communicated really, the other two, Dave and Martin, because seems like Andrew Fletcher has been the communicator who somehow brought the two or the three of them together and said, "Hey, maybe it's time to go back to the studio. We have some music parts here. We have some, let's maybe make another album." And so after his death, they really, and they said it like that, they had to find a different way. We had to find a way of communicating, becoming friends. So Andrew Fletcher, and I think this is of course very shortened now about this person and his role in the band, but it looks like in the personal dynamic, he somehow was kind of part of the competition. It looked like they competed for Andrew or who's with Andrew, so but he also was the bridge and the communicator, and so yeah, they had to find a new way to communicate or a way to communicate without Andrew Fletcher, and they seem to have found this because they brought out another album, which is Memento Mori, after he died, and they had a successful tour last year and the year before, so they managed to communicate. And I think from all that I've read and listened to, their relationship improved and got richer because they had to handle this crisis of a sudden death of their band member, and because they were forced to start communicating in another way. So, and yeah, for the dynamic that we talked about between Dave and Martin, it seemed to be a very intense event. So that's what I know about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, pretty fascinating because we're back in Mars land here. Now, what's really interesting here is that because Dave's seventh house has Scorpio on the cusp, his seventh house is ruled by Scorpio. The planet, traditional ruler of Scorpio is Mars. So in Dave's chart, Mars, in addition to representing Mars things like we've talked about, competition and how you go after what you want, assertion, it also represents his partner, collaborator. And what was happening on May 26th, 2022 is that Chiron was right on his Mars. And Chiron has about a 51 year cycle. So this is a once in a lifetime event.
Hmm.
Chiron on his Mars. So that would be a big crisis having to do with partner, a collaborator, seventh house. And also, like you said, this huge turning point when it comes to how he and Martin were using their Marses in relation to each other, because, of course, as Chiron was conjunct right on top of Dave's Mars, it means it was also in conjunct quincunx Martin's Mars and changing the whole Martian dynamic between
Hmm.
them. And
Hmm.
I would guess something about like let's get over ourselves, right? Like
Yes.
let's get over our sort of petty differences and let's take it to a new level and all that. So that was big. And the other really big transit, well, another really big transit that stands out to me, another once in a lifetime transit, is that Uranus, radical change, sudden change, expect the unexpected, break from the past, connection with a whole new future, was right on his sun. So, you know, yeah, the shocking event, the taking life in a totally new, unexpected direction. And, the Chiron and Uranus can both have that crisis kind of energy. So big crisis around who am I now as a creator, and
Hmm.
who do I want to be as a creator moving forward? And of
Hmm.
course, this big crisis around partnership, collaboration, who am I collaborating with? Yeah. So those are two epic transits happening. And then just also pointing out that he was in his Saturn return, his second Saturn return at the time, since he was born with Saturn in Aquarius. And
Mm.
Saturn was in Aquarius when that happened, which is also a huge turning point in terms of career path and how life is structured, and it's going into new territory. And it's Saturn in Aquarius, so Aquarius about groups. Certainly we can think of a band as an Aquarian entity. How do
Mm.
we work with groups, right? And friends. So
Yeah.
yeah, very epic time for Dave.
So interesting. And I just thought when you were explaining all of this that as the public we only know so much. We don't know, we just know like a little what happened. And then for the next album, of course, they talked about the death of Andrew Fletcher and what it did to the band. But I think the transits show how intense this must have been for Dave in this case internally, because
Yeah.
that's not really talked about. He's not such like he's not talking to the press or people all the time, so we don't know from his words how intense this was, but the chart speaks a language of quite some intensity again, right?
Yes, absolutely. Big,
Yeah.
big shock factor for sure. Big,
Yeah.
big shock with Uranus. Um,
Yeah.
shall we look at Martin's
Mm-hmm.
chart in relation to
Mm-hmm.
that? So, so for Martin, yeah, also very big deal. Big Pluto transit.
Oh.
Pluto right on his Saturn, again, once in a lifetime transit, super intense. Saturn, as we've said, career planet, right? And Pluto can be the death and rebirth. And Saturn, and this, I start to get ideas about what Martin's rising sign might be, just thinking of, from what we've talked about and from the
Mm-hmm.
transits, it kind of makes me wonder if he might have Cancer as his rising sign and Saturn maybe in his seventh house or, ruler of his seventh house, considering like this could be very literal, right? Death, Pluto of possibly, if Saturn is indeed in his seventh house or rules his seventh house of a partner, collaborator. Um, and pretty dark. Pluto to Saturn, both of those are considered fairly dark planets, right? I mean, in the sky, Saturn and Pluto came together in Capricorn in January of 2020, right? And the whole
Yep.
world went into a pretty dark time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and into personally, when Pluto is influencing your Saturn, that can be quite a confrontation with fear and mortality, certainly, and the true limits Saturn that we all experience as humans and bodies with limited time. I would think this was a
Mm-hmm.
big, like, oh, what the, who am I and what am I do? Like anyone could die at any moment. I could die at any moment. What am I doing with my life? And what does that mean about my reality and how I navigate this reality? I mean, huge. And also to mention that his Jupiter is right there too. Pluto hadn't gotten exactly on his Jupiter, but close enough. And Jupiter is faith and trust. And Pluto to Jupiter is a huge crisis of faith. I mean, what do I believe in? And can I have any faith in this world when something like this can happen from out of nowhere? So yeah, very,
Mm-hmm.
and that transit, of course, that transit is still continuing for Martin because Pluto moves so slowly. Pluto is, still transiting his Jupiter. And I would imagine in the
Oh yeah.
aftermath of something like this rearranges your belief systems. What do I know to be true? What can I put my faith in now? And I would imagine he's still wrestling with that as Pluto is still on his Jupiter. Um,
Oh, interesting.
and then I thought this is very poetic too, that Saturn in the sky at the end of Aquarius was on his south node. And when Saturn connects with the south node, this is not once in a lifetime. It happens every 29 years, but still fairly rare. But
Yeah.
that typically represents an end of something when it comes to career. And here it is in Aquarius, the group, the team, the band, it's all changing. There's an emptying out, an ending, south node of something related to that construct, to the old form, Saturn,
Mm-hmm.
right? So a lot, yeah, it's interesting that Saturn was so active or activated for him at that time. But yeah, very, very big deal.
Interesting. Yeah. Uh, Amazing how you can always find something in the charts for things that happen in life. Yeah,
Astrology works. Astrology works. Should we look at Andrew's chart, or did you have more
sure.
to? Okay.
No.
So, and again, we don't have the birth time, so we don't know the houses or the angles, the rising sign, any of that. But we do know that he was born quite close to Martin, so he was also going through Saturn. They were born less than a month apart, maybe like 3 weeks apart or something, both born in July 1961. Um, but it's interesting what you were saying about Andrew playing more of the mediator role between the two, because he was the Cancer, right? He was the Cancer sun, so the caretaker, the nurturer, being sensitive to other people's emotions and needs. And
Mm-hmm.
so you could kind of see, navigating between the Taurus and the Leo, who might get
Ah,
fixed in
yes.
their right ways of being, and the
Ah.
Cancer coming in like, oh,
Oh, yeah, I get that.
try to make everyone feel better. Okay, but noticing, okay, so he was also going through Pluto on his Saturn on his south node, but also a big Chiron transit, which was Chiron, wait, Chiron at 15 degrees of Aries in a very tight square to his sun at 16 degrees of Cancer. So this does not have to mean death. We've all gone through Chiron squaring our sun or conjunct our sun or opposite our sun. We're still here. But it seems like, yeah, some kind, again, a healing crisis. And how did he die? Do you know?
So he had, I don't know, oh, I don't know the English word, something in his body, I think a blood vessel wasn't working anymore very suddenly. So like with the aorta, do you call it like that? The main vessel of the
The main
blood.
artery?
But something like the shall I Google it or
That's all right. That's all right.
okay, so something with his blood vessels and something was broken there and that was very severely and so he had no chance. Not no chance to
Wow.
survive that.
Wow. And we don't, so, Chiron to the sun, yeah, healing crisis. We could, thinking about the sun, I would expect something to do with the heart, um, or yeah, and or head with all this Aries energy going on. But again, not being able to see the houses, and and it makes me wonder about maybe a Uranus transit happening. Well, Uranus was sextile his sun, exactly harmonizing with his sun, not what we typically would expect for death. Um, so yeah, again, we don't know his whole chart.
But
Um,
mhm.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I just want because you just said like I think with the Chiron, is it? I'm always calling 1, 2, 3. This is the square to the.
Yes, square to the sun.
So
Yep.
not every Chiron square anything does mean death. So I just
Right.
want to just
No,
you just said that, but I know people who are very anxious and can get scared of astrology, and this
totally.
nothing can ever predict for certain that something bad is gonna happen. It could also be like, what else could this transits have been, for example? It was just healing crisis, right? That's what you said.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of the essence of Chiron to the sun, and especially, a healing crisis around identity, creativity, and maybe there's something about that caretaking energy of Cancer, and maybe there's something going on energetically about putting, I don't know, yeah, how he was nurturing other people, and yeah, I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. Um, and yeah, and we see like, yeah, he was going through Pluto conjunct Saturn. No, that doesn't mean you're going to die. Martin was going through Pluto conjunct Saturn too, and he didn't die. But any big Pluto transit is some kind of confrontation with mortality, and we don't know
Hmm.
how that's going to show up. There,
And
there is
yeah,
there is a death of some kind, which doesn't even have to be a literal death. It can be a metaphorical death, right? And in this case, it was in this case, it was literal. And again, it would be instructive to see his houses and, to see more specifically what was going on. And he also, we're not sure about his moon sign because
Yeah.
again, I cast the chart for noon, and
Yeah.
at noon he has the moon at the end of Taurus. I kind of like the Taurus moon, like Taurus moon plus Cancer sun. That's a pretty uh, it's very like nurturing, but also there's an even keel quality to the Taurus moon that I could see like as the other band members got heated or caught up in drama or whatever, that he could be someone who was staying pretty chill and copacetic and let's just kind of flow with the energy and not get too worked up about anything, possibly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sounds about right.
Mm,
I guess. Yeah. Wow, so interesting. I think we're done, are we?
I think so.
And we managed and we managed it's a couple of days before Mercury retrograde. We
Right.
managed to I think we managed to record. We had Pisces moon, you said today,
Pisces moon.
but we found our words. So yeah, thank you, Emily. That was so interesting and fascinating again, and I hope it's gonna inspire many people. And yeah, if people want to look into Synastry, you still have your course online, right?
I
We can buy
do. Yeah.
that. I did that in the real time with you 2 years ago or whenever, but it's highly, highly recommended if people want to explore their own relationship astrology or maybe whatever Dave Gahan or Martin Gore activates in their charts, they can do your synastry course. Is there anything else coming up online that you want to talk about?
No, just thank you so much for this opportunity. It was really fun. I get very it activates my astro geekery in a very fun way. And yeah, I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate your knowledge and insights that you brought. And I think we did great with the Pisces moon and
We
Mercury
did.
stationing.
Thank you so much, Emily. Then I'm gonna stop our recording now. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne.